6 years for murder. As Oscar Pistorius returns to prison, we're asking if celebrity status is becoming a defense in itself. Also on today's program, counting down to the Rio Olympic Games. With less than a month to go, the city's police is coming under fire over its fight to clear the streets of crime. And in Picture This, a steaming pile of bulls. Thousands travel to Pamplona for the start of the city's annual bull run. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. 2 years and 2 verdicts later, Oscar Pistorius has been convicted and sentenced for the murder of his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp. But the judge ignored the prosecution's recommendation of a 15-year minimum sentence and gave him 6 instead. She says Pistorius was vulnerable and remorseful. But was her decision influenced by Oscar Pistorius's expensively assembled defense team, the media attention, and his position as one of the stars of the South African athletics team? Today's newsmaker is Oscar Pistorius, as we ask whether justice was truly served by his 6-year sentence.
Pistorius, please rise.
A fallen hero stands to receive his sentence. A dramatic 3-year saga nearing what some hope will be its final end.
I experienced Mr. Pistorius as a man that was broken.
One in which the very nature of Oscar Pistorius himself was on trial.
Another instance of aggressive behavior.
The fastest man on no legs.
And ran and took the medal off him, the gold medal, and put it around my son's neck and said, "This is for you, champion."
Reduced to pleading for mercy.
My lady, I didn't have time to think. I heard this noise and I thought it was somebody coming out to attack me, so I fired my firearm.
Every detail of the killing of his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, laid bare for the world to see.
Oscar has to pay for what he did. He has to pay for it.
All leading to this moment.
In the result, the sentence that I impose on the accused is 6 years imprisonment.
Pistorius' sentence has drawn intense criticism. Not from the most affected, Riva Steenkamp's parents, but from those who see the trial as a prism through which South Africa's societal ills are illuminated. That money and celebrity played a part. That the victim was a woman. Or that Oscar Pistorius is white. All held up as reasons why the former Paralympic champion was given a 6-year sentence in a country with a mandatory minimum of 15 years for murder.
I think the system was imbalanced, let's be honest. There was something is not right somewhere in the system.
The same judge originally convicted Pistorius of manslaughter in 2014. But a higher court reversed that to murder last year. The prosecution has said Pistorius had a violent streak and that he murdered Steenkamp on Valentine's Day 3 years ago. Pistorius says he thought she was an intruder and feared for his life. South Africa does have one of the highest murder rates in the world, something used as a justification for Pistorius' fear and as a criticism that his sentence sends the wrong message to would-be offenders. What is clear is that Pistorius is going back to prison after already having served 1 year. While his trial is extraordinary, some have criticized it as nothing more than a spectacle. It's unclear whether the debate about equal justice in South Africa, sparked by his sentence, will fade from the spotlight, along with the man himself. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Johannesburg is Editor-in-Chief of Stuff Magazine, Toby Shapshack, and from Pretoria, criminal defense lawyer, former prosecutor and judge, Marius du Toit. Thanks both of you for joining us. Marius du Toit, let me start with you. So Judge Thokozile Masipa's decision, 6 years for murder, was that the right decision?
Well, I thought it was a lenient sentence, Imran, but I don't think it was the wrong decision. And by that I'm saying I don't think the state will necessarily be successful if they bring an application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. But my personal conviction was that a sentence of 10 years would have been more appropriate. But having said that, when Judge Masipa considered the factors, she really weighed up everything as she should have. And I thought it was a really well-considered and well-versed judgment that she gave.
Okay, Toby, so if it wasn't the wrong decision, that means this is what justice for Riva looks like. 6 years for Oscar Pistorius.
Well, I think it's a travesty. It really is. I mean, this is a man who intended to kill whoever it was standing behind that toilet door. He shot 4 bullets through a tiny cubicle using this black talon exploding ammunition. Whoever was behind that door, whether it was Riva or a burglar, as he, claimed he thought was behind there, despite it being such a secure estate, he intended to kill that person. And I think the judge has been unnecessarily swayed by Oscar Pistorius's dramatics. And I don't think there's anyone in their right minds who doesn't think Oscar Pistorius was crying for himself and not crying for Riva. Obviously, he made all the right noises. He was remorseful. He said the right thing. He tried to apologize. If you had a lawyer as well paid as Barry Roux, you would say the right things as well. So I think the judge has been manipulated by a superior legal team that Oscar Pistorius was able to afford. And it really gives the lie to the perception that there are two there are 2 courts. There's one for the poor and there's one for the rich.
So Marius, yes, does it not, the optics, when people look at this, they go, he's rich, he's white, he's a celebrity, he took off his prosthetics in court and he swayed the judge. It does seem to vindicate them, does it not, Marius?
Well, Imran, it's a good argument that Toby makes, but the reality of it is that when you look at a matter like this, when you deal with armed robbery, when you deal with murder where it's not premeditated, where you deal with rape of a victim that's above 18 years, then you have a minimum sentence of 15 years. But there's always a discretion to it, and that discretion rests with the judge. And the judge has a discretion to say, well, if I find substantial and compelling reasons, I may deviate from that sentence, and then it's up to me. So the moment I have a set of facts before me, and each case should be considered on its own facts. You can't compare apples with pears, but each case should be considered. And once you've done that and you arrive at the conclusion that I have substantial and compelling reasons in this matter, then you have a discretion to decide what sentence you wish to impose. And in this set of facts, I think one must never forget, even though we have Riva that was killed in this matter, this was never a spousal abuse. This was never a relationship gone wrong where the one partner killed the other. This has always been a case where the person was under the erroneous belief that he was being attacked. He defended himself, even though that was completely out of proportion to the attack, because the attack was not there. That's why I say it's an erroneous belief.
Okay, Marius,
even though you have all those set of factors together, the reality of it is...
Yeah, sure. Allow me to interrupt you for just a second. I want to drill down on the racial issue here for just a second, because Judge Thokozela Masipa is black. Oscar Pistorius is white. There are many, particularly on social media. There's a lot of noise on social media. People believe that he got let off because he's white. Does that hold up in your eyes?
No, it doesn't. Rubbish.
Okay.
That's honestly my view, Imran.
Okay,
I
sure.
think that... I wish we can get past the racial thing.
Sure. You don't have to expand on that. Toby Shapshack, that's rubbish. Did race have any role in this? Because in the aftermath, race does seem to have a role because people are talking about it and people feel it was a factor. Toby?
Well, it's South Africa. Race is always going to play a role in any kind of public debate. I think the more pertinent question is, was he rich or was he poor? And he's been able to hire quality lawyers and an advocate like Barry Roux that's been able to put forward a case for him to get a mitigated sentence, and very successfully. I think the judge has erred on the side of mitigation as opposed to sending a real message about what gun owners should do.
Marius, lots of tweets about gender. Pearl Boshomani, the journalist, saying women's lives are worth absolutely nothing. Our rapists don't go to jail. Our murderers barely get punished. In a country where there's awful violence, against women. Can you understand, Marius, the anger from many women and many women's groups that there's no real justice for Riva? Yet again, a woman has been hurt, a woman has been killed, and there hasn't been justice for her.
I understand that the people that strive for gender equality and the people who understand that we have a massive problem with gender violence in this country are basically crying out at this stage saying this, and we're not happy with this. But, you know, when we get to that, we have to go back to the set of facts in this case. And I heard Toby speaking about the circumstances surrounding the matter. We have to remember that at the end of the day, the Supreme Court of Appeal confirmed what Judge Masipa said, that this was not a spousal abuse. So you can never argue that it was man against woman, or it was husband against wife, or it was anything like that, because that was never found. And so the moment you get involved with gender violence, you are basically saying that, listen, he intended to kill Riva, and although it was an intention to kill the person behind the door, and it happened to be Riva, it was never as a natural consequence of an argument that ensued between them. So those are the facts. So we can't talk about gender violence because it's simply not a gender murder. It's, at the end of the day, the victim happened to be Riva Steenkamp, who was his girlfriend. And that's a reality. And I understand that you have many people from various groups crying out about this. But this doesn't detract from the fact that we have to get back to the set of facts in this matter. And the facts were he intended to kill whoever was behind the door, and he perceived it to be a burglar. Whether we like it or not, whether we disagree with it or not, is immaterial, because those are not the facts that the court found. And I must be honest with you, I was from day one convinced that this was not a spousal abuse, that this was, in fact, a person under the completely erroneous belief. And that's why, because his inferences were so wrong, so out of proportion, that's why he was convicted of murder.
Okay, Toby. We've been talking about this for more than 2 years now globally. The South African legal system has been under the global spotlight. We're on an international channel now going out to the world talking about the South African legal system. Do you feel it's failed the test or showed its robustness against scrutiny?
Well, I think it's a debate that's going to go on for a long time. I think in this instance, you know, as much as the judge says that the facts were before us and it's not a court of public opinion, the court of public opinion has found very harshly against the fact that this is a man who intended to kill someone, whether it was Riva, whether it was a burglar. And that is more the instance. It's an abuse of a man who has claimed he knew how to use a firearm, he'd gone through all the training, who was a bad witness in court. That is more the message that it sends out, that if you're rich and you can hire a good lawyer, you can get a smaller murder charge than people can for burglary. You know, in the Shireen Devani instance, it's totally different. You know, there, the police were incompetent, to say the least. And the judge threw out the case before he even had to give evidence. And yet it seemed on the evidence or the face of the facts that he was responsible for something. But there you had a, you know, equally damaging instance of South Africa's criminal justice system looking badly because the police did very badly. I mean, in the Oscar story, you know, he said that some of his luxury watches were stolen by the police while they were investigating his home. The investigating officer had several open charges of attempted murder against him. People don't forget this kind of thing. South Africa is trying to present a face to the world where these horror stories people always portray of how violent the crime is in the country, that something would change. And I don't think this has come out very well for South Africa in general. I think Oscar Pistorius' fame and celebrity has proved to be very useful in ultimately getting him just over a third of the prescribed mandatory sentence for murder. This is a man found guilty of murder who has gotten away with a third of the jail time he should have.
Okay,
and he'll be out,
sure,
everyone says, in about 3 years.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well, because when he gets parole would be an interesting reality. We'll have to wait and see. Just enough time for a final comment from you, Marius. And I'm loath to ask a legal man about a hypothetical, but going back to the very beginning again, if Oscar wasn't rich, if he wasn't a celebrity, would it be normal, would it be realistic in a case like this for someone like him to get only 6 years?
Well, you know, it's difficult to guesstimate what would have happened. I can tell you that I prosecuted a black pupil who stabbed a white pupil to death after school. And he was convicted of culpable homicide, and he got a wholly suspended sentence. And although the white family was very upset about it, the reality of it was the right decision by the judge at the time. So having said that, you know, Toby was referring to it, our legal system is not perfect. I'm not saying for 1 second it is. But then again, let's look across the world. You only have to look as far as America to understand in the O.J. Simpson that no legal system is perfect. Whether you have a jury system, whether you have a single judge, the reality is there are flaws. And our investigative ability by our detectives leaves much to be desired. Many cases aren't properly investigated, they aren't properly brought to book, and the reality is many cases do fail. So we do have a crime rate that's out of control. We have investigating that's not done as it should be done. We have prosecution that's not always up to scratch, but unfortunately that's the reality, I think, of any justice system.
Okay.
And I think the reality is, if you look as a whole at this matter, I think...
It's interesting that you mentioned O.J. Simpson, another rich, much-loved celebrity, but we don't have any more time for the rest of this discussion. Unfortunately, I've got to wrap. Marius and Toby, thank you very much. Still to come on the Newsmakers, Brazilian police battle to get Rio ready for the Summer Olympics. And in picture this, painting the town red for the Pamplona Bull Run. There's less than a month to go until Rio de Janeiro hosts the Summer Olympics. But as that deadline approaches, the problems appear to be mounting up. Brazil's government and president have been embroiled in a corruption scandal. There have been delays to the construction of the venues, a recession, and the Zika virus. But one concern is overshadowing them all: safety. And as Francis Collins reports, authorities have been using heavy-handed tactics in an attempt to clear the streets of crime.
Aí a polícia, mandou meu filho, parou meu filho para ver a documentação, viu tudinho, que tinha os documentos, tudo dele estava na carteira, inclusive o remédio que estava com problema de pedra no rins. Aí ele pegou, mandou meu filho embora. Nesse que meu filho virou, ele deu um tiro nas costas do meu filho.
In Brazil, one person is fatally shot every 10 minutes, and the police are often involved. In the last 5 years, Brazilian police have killed more than 11,000 people, more than twice as many as in the United States.
Que a polícia militar tem usado a força de forma desnecessária, excessiva e arbitrária.
Brazil's military police are at war with criminal gangs operating in the cities of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. So far this year, more than 100 people have been killed in police operations in Rio. An increase of 54% compared to 2 years ago. Police killings are rarely investigated, and those responsible often do not face justice. Around 50,000 Brazilians are killed each year in gun-related homicides, one of the highest rates in the world. Many of the victims are connected to drug trafficking gangs operating in the slums or favelas in major cities. Unemployment there is high, and access to firearms is easy. Murder is the main cause of violent death, but killings by police are now in second place. Officers say they act in self-defense, as they often come under fire. Rio and other cities have a history of increased violence involving police and security forces ahead of major events. The Olympics are proving no exception. Police killings in Rio hit a high of more than 1,300 when the city staged the Pan American Games in 2007. That number eased off before rising again ahead of the 2014 World Cup and this year's Olympics. police violence has increased as authorities have evicted thousands of families living in Rio ahead of the Olympics. And there's a real fear that as the Games get closer, things will only get worse. Francis Collins, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Rio de Janeiro is Atila Roque, Brazil Country Director for Amnesty International. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Roque. Now, we know that, is there a clear link between that and the build-up to the Olympics? Can we categorically say that it's connected to the build-up to the Olympics?
Well, I would say yes, though, of course, the authorities systematically deny that. They say that they were talking about regular operation. But what Amnesty International has documented, actually not only in Brazil, is that every time that we have a major sport event, what happened is a rising on the risk of human rights violation in different areas. In the case of Brazil, where, as your report shows, we have a history of a head-handed police force, particularly against poor and people living in the peripheries and the favelas, that risk has increased over the last years during occasions of major sport events.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at some of the stats of police themselves being killed, in Rio, 114 police were killed in 2014 during raids in the favelas. And this year, so far, 54 police have been killed in Rio, most of them off duty, many on their way to work. This is from Jornal O Dia and journalist Gabriela Elizondo. Now, it gives the impression that they themselves, the cops, are being hunted. So don't you have a little bit of sympathy for them because they seem to be hunted by gangs, I would presume?
Totally. I think that's where the problem rests. If we are looking into a situation where, for many years already, we are having the whole public security area being driven by a logic of war. A logic of war which focus on an internal enemy, which is located in certain part of the cities. The consequence of that you increase the level of confrontation, hate, and deterioration between the relationship between the citizens and the police itself. I used to say that the police and the poor, young, mostly black people living in the favela, they are both very similar because I talk about the policeman and the victim with people having a very similar social background, and they are both a victim of that war. Mm-hmm. They pay a very high price, but Brazil police kill and die in astonishing levels, and that do not bring more security for anybody. So everyone is losing in that strategy.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make, and we had cops and firefighters at the airport recently with signs saying, "Welcome to hell. We don't get paid. You will not be safe." That's astonishing, especially if you're a visitor to a place like Rio. Finally, Atila, let's just step back for a second and look at the big picture. So we look at all of this violence. We see the state government is broke and they can't even pay the cops. The budget has been slashed by a third. All this political uncertainty in Brasilia and the Zika virus. With all of this in mind, can Brazil still have, or Rio still have, a safe and smooth Olympic Games?
Well, it's very important for you to know, to realize that all this violence that we're talking about, and a lot of those problems, they do not happen at random around everywhere in the city. We are talking about a very selective kind of violence, okay? So if you look at the data of homicides in Brazil and in Rio in particular, if you look at the data of police killing and police dying on the city as well, they're not happening everywhere. They are happening on particular territory who are at risk, where the poor live, where a particular kind of population lives. So I would say probably most of the visitors during the Olympics are not going even to notice that is going on.
Atila, good to talk to you. Atila Roque from Amnesty International. Thank you very much. In today's Picture This is Pamplona's annual bull running festival. Alongside thousands of spectators, animal rights activists have been making their voices heard. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker was Oscar Pistorius, as we asked whether his celebrity status affected his trial. He was given just 6 years in prison for the murder of his girlfriend on Valentine's Day 2014. The minimum for murder is set at 15 years. So why did the judge show leniency? In a first for South Africa, much of the trial was broadcast live. And with the media frenzy inside and outside the courtroom, it sometimes felt like there was more than one person on trial. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. As always, thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.